Hello, advanced English learners. Welcome back to another wonderful conversation. I'm joined by the one and only Greg, and we like to do these sessions to help you improve your listening comprehension, your conversation skills in English, your pronunciation, your intonation, the way of saying, like how to say things, how to introduce topics, how to switch topics, essentially how to communicate, right? It comes down to that. And we have fun doing them. We know that you enjoy them as well. So we'll keep doing them for as long as we can. All right, so today's topic, we're going to explore the benefits of video games and what you can learn from gaming, essentially. Let's get into it.
Sounds fun.
Okay, so let's first start off by prefacing it with maybe thinking about it in the lens of positive video games and more of the video games that promote, I want to say, positive concepts. I mean, I know that there's a lot of types of video games, different genres. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that, Greg, because you have a lot of experience in this field.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Education and video games have always sort of loosely overlapped, right?
Right, while at the same time almost having a contentious relationship.
And there is a contentious relationship as well. I remember as a kid, I always loved to play the educational video games.
I agree with you, and I like reminisce fondly on those video game memories, and I often ask you about them if you played the same video games as a kid, and it turns out you did.
Yeah, so yeah. A classic when we were growing up was called Mario Teaches Typing, and you would basically, it would just show words on the screen, and you would type them, and to the extent that you could type fast enough, your Mario character would sort of traverse this perilous path. And you could see him sort of keeping up. And there were special keys you could hit at certain times that would allow you to get like extra points and stuff. And basically the goal was to see how far you could get without making errors. And if you made errors when you're typing, it would slow down the character, or he would fall off or whatever.
Yeah, and there are like specific ones for touch typing, which is essentially when you don't look at the keypad or the keyboard, right, and you're just able to...
That's the whole purpose of this.
That's the purpose.
Is to get you fluent with the keyboard, which is actually quite needed. I mean, I've seen some people, particularly from older generations, who just didn't get that kind of training. And, they're not nearly as fast with a keyboard. So, anyways, the point in saying that is there are games that are explicitly designed for education. Yes. And those can be a lot of fun. They tend to be lower budget, though. I'm speaking from the perspective of a gamer.
Okay.
They tend to be lower budget, and as you get a little bit older, you start to, view them in a less rosy light relative to classic video games, which are intended to be purely for entertainment.
So what are some of the classic video games?
Well, you can break them into several categories.
Okay.
Right? So you have strategy games, which could be turn-based, but those tend to be, you're building like an army to go attack other armies, right?
Okay.
There's strategy involved, kind of like if you played Risk.
Okay,
the board game. It's a little bit like that. You can have what are called first-person shooters. Mm-hmm. And those are basically you run around in a world and you're a soldier of some sort, and you're fighting aliens or you're fighting enemies, whatever. Right. So you're going around, but that's a first-person experience.
Yeah.
Then you have RPGs.
Role-playing
games, one of my favorites. And those are, you're in this immersive world.
Yeah.
And
you have an avatar.
You have an avatar, and there's some kind of storyline that you're following.
Yeah, that's nice.
And those can be really cool. Sometimes the first-person shooters, they're called FPSs.
Yeah.
And the role-playing games can overlap.
And
so then also what you have more recently is something called massively multiplayer online RPGs.
MMORPG.
And one of the breakouts for that, well, there was EverQuest, of course.
Okay.
But the one that probably got the biggest in
Can I
terms
guess?
of brand name, yes.
World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly.
This is coming from a non-gamer.
Exactly. And it's worth, sort of covering these different categories because each of them provides a type of education in its own right.
I think that's fair.
Right? Each one of these styles provides a different type of challenge.
Right.
If it's an RPG, it's about sort of learning to adapt to an unfamiliar environment, trying to understand clues, and uncover like little riddles and patterns. Then you have RTSs, real-time strategy games. Those are like, the same kind of skills you develop when you play chess.
Interesting.
Right?
And chess is a tough game.
Exactly.
Lots of strategy involved, lots of brain power you're using.
Exactly. Trying to plan your next step.
Yeah.
They tend to be also quite competitive, so you can play against other players.
Right. Or AI.
Both are a lot of fun. And so in those cases, that's really driving your mind to be strategic.
Right.
With FPSs, that's a lot of like fast twitch reaction.
Right. So I would say let's just backtrack for a second. So with the strategy, maybe thinking about it in terms of amping up your problem-solving skills.
I would argue that all of them use problem-solving skills.
Okay, that's
types.
good. That's good.
I would say that the RPG, which one were you referring to?
I was talking about the one before RPG.
So RPG is the sort of role-playing.
Okay, so it must be that.
Yeah, that's often you have riddles.
Okay, so problem-solving. Yeah,
problem-solving,
that's
totally.
what makes me think of.
Yep. RTSs, it's sort of strategy, right? Resource management.
That also makes me think of being able to think of a decision quickly and because indecisiveness is actually a big problem. Think about how many business opportunities get postponed or never transpire, they never happen because somebody was too afraid to make that decision on the spot.
Really good point. Yeah, all the time businesses languish, right? They don't get anywhere. They languish because people are afraid to make a decision, or they spend too long equivocating,
or deliberating over
trying to make up their minds, and not committing to something. The ability to be decisive, to make a decision, and move forward and own that decision, really important skill. So that's a great point.
I remember I came in when you were doing a gaming sesh one weekend, and I saw that you were playing Witcher, The Wild Hunt.
So The Witcher would be a
role-playing
RPG with some elements of an FPS.
Okay. And one of the, I don't know what you call it in the gaming terminology, but there was the visual, the little like storyline happening with the characters.
Yep.
And then you had to make a few decisions.
Totally.
I felt a little bit of anxiety when I saw you had to make that because obviously I wasn't playing the game. I'm an outsider completely. But that just made me think of, wow, this is really enabling people to work on that decisiveness skill.
Yeah, that comes from a classic style of book when we were kids.
Yeah.
Called Choose Your Own Adventure.
Okay.
Have you ever read a Choose Your Own Adventure?
I don't know. If I'm being honest, if I saw the cover, it might recall some memories, but I don't know that I...
Okay, these are really cool.
Okay.
So the Choose Your Own Adventure
now I'm intrigued.
You're reading a book, and you get, it sort of starts the story for you. You're walking through a forest, and the tree cover grows thick, and the light grows dim, and all of a sudden in front of you, you see a cave.
Oh.
Do you go into the cave, or do you, return home?
Okay, I've definitely played certain types of games like that.
And at the bottom of the, this is analog, right?
It's a book,
and then it'll say, if you choose to go home, turn to page 3.
Okay,
If you choose to go into the cave, turn to page 15.
Okay, yeah, very cool.
Right? And so you sort of you go into the cave and you encounter some other sort of branch, and you have to choose,
a decision.
right? And you flip to some other part of the book. And as you go through, you will find that some choices will get you in trouble, and other choices might find you some treasure, right? And so it's the same concept in these RPGs. You get to choose how you interact with other characters.
Right.
And interestingly, there's also some social dynamics at play.
Okay, let's talk about that. In what way?
So oftentimes when you're interacting, you have the option to choose between being a polite character, a rude character, or just strange. There's basically anywhere along the spectrum, you can reply in different ways. And based on how you reply, the characters will react accordingly.
Right.
And by being polite, you might open up certain storylines. By being rude, you might close off certain storylines.
So what would be the incentive to be rude if the polite storyline opens, or the polite character opens up so much, more opportunity? I mean,
it depends on the game. So some games, the polite character always gets the more interesting storyline.
Sure.
In a game like Witcher, believe it or not, sometimes being selfish actually gives you items and, weapons that are more powerful.
Interesting.
And so it really is a hard choice. It's like, I'm compelled to feel like, generally speaking, I'm a nice person, so I want to do the nice thing here.
Right.
On the other hand, I know that if I do the bad thing,
right,
if I trick this person, I'm going to get a more powerful item.
Interesting.
And so you actually have to make a decision.
That's tough.
And you have to decide, do I care? This is just a video game. Who cares, right?
Does it impact my identity in any way?
Am I this kind of person?
Yeah. I can imagine. I know that I would have some cognitive dissonance if I, felt like my character had to behave in a certain way in order for me to level up in the game that went against what my personal beliefs are, especially since I'm in the space of communication and, so that I wonder how I would feel doing that. But you make a great point, because I think with the social dynamics at play, cut off the C there, I think it's interesting because it gives you a little bit of a thought experiment, and it allows you to see maybe what kinds of reactions you would get if you were anything other than polite. And it could be a little bit of a social experiment with, a lot of upside because you learn a lot, but not much, it's not really negative in the sense that you're not impacting other people's lives. It's low risk because you're working with, a character in a computer game, right? Or video game.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think also, arguably, the most important lesson I derive from those is it puts you in these sort of moral scenarios, right? Where you have to decide what you feel is right. Because I can tell you in business, you encounter those situations all the time.
Yeah.
Are we going to be completely honest with our client? Are we going to be completely honest with our customers? Are we going to be transparent? Are we going to, disclose the problems that we have, before they become a bigger problem? Are we going to, confront someone who is behaving in a way that's problematic, right? Like these kinds of things you deal with in the real world, and particularly in business, but also in your social life. When you get to simulate that in a video game, it just gives you a little more preparation for those real world scenarios. Right. And that itself, I think, is very powerful.
What I like about, especially if you're selective about the video games and we're viewing them in a positive light based on that criteria, what I like about that is that it's active, right? TV watching, film watching, it's relatively passive. Unless you're, making it a language activity. Like I remember when I was learning French, I would devour so many different films in French, and I would be so actively
That's a good
watching.
Point. Yeah, you can do it actively.
Absolutely. I'd pause it. I'd check my comprehension. I'd write down expressions, right? But most people are not doing that when they're consuming, television and film. And look, there's a place and time to do that. We're big film people. But you have to recognize that one is relatively more passive than something like a video game where you're really activating lots of neural pathways in your brain.
Right. And to be clear, though, there are video games that are very passive, right?
Okay.
They're video games where you can just tune out and sort of very mindlessly do things.
Okay.
And couldn't even tell you the names of them because I don't play them.
Yeah, and I haven't seen you play any of those, so I don't even know that those existed.
Those do exist. So there's, in all of entertainment, there are opportunities to just completely turn off your brain if you want.
And there's a great expression for this saying and it applies to different arenas in life, but you can say just to coast. So COAST, like a sea coast. You're just hanging out, you're relaxing, you're on your float, and you're just coasting.
That's funny. That's one way to think of coast. So coasting also, in my mind, to coast, like it's, I think of like something that's sliding.
Huh.
Like a train coasts along the tracks.
Okay.
But I like that imagery of like the coast.
That's what it makes me think of.
Like the seaside.
Yeah, just kind of relaxing.
Yeah.
Letting the waves take you where they may.
Yeah.
Just a little side note here. I remember in one of the spin classes we used to do a lot when we were in New York, there was a place that did spinning and they would sell T-shirts and they had no coasting, meaning you have to put pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to just take it easy. You need to no coasting. You need to crush it. So side note.
It's funny because even when I am watching shows or movies, I actually do try to take a more active approach to it. So I'm watching, sort of the angles of the shots.
Yeah, it's true.
I pay attention to the kind of dialogue that's being used.
Yeah. The registers they're using in their language.
I pay a lot of attention to the character development. Like, what are they trying to express with this character?
Yeah.
How is this character going to evolve, or how has this character evolved over the course of the narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's absolutely a way of doing it actively, and language learning is definitely one way to do that, but also just being really observant, understanding the social dynamics, the social connections, the plot development, the character development. So maybe next time you watch something, even in your native language, give that approach a try because it's really fun. I mean, we enjoy doing that. So
yeah, taking it back to video games, that's the same goes for video games.
Yeah.
You can play games mindlessly or you can play them very proactively. And my personal experience, it's always more fun to be very engaged with the game.
Yeah.
Right? Really try and challenge yourself. Like in most games, you can also dial down the intensity. So you can choose a very easy mode, or you can choose more challenging modes.
Yeah.
And I have to give credit to my brother because I was always tempted to turn it just a little bit too easy.
Yeah.
So that I didn't have any concerns about getting through.
Right.
My brother, on the other hand, he always liked to turn just a little bit harder so that he would fail multiple times. And by the way, that's another huge part of video games.
Yeah.
It's all about failing and trying again.
Such
failing
important life lessons. I mean, that in and of itself is, I would say, enough to want to maybe incentivize you to play video games. Getting practice with failing and not being afraid to fail. I mean, business is all about that. You're constantly testing, trying out things, failing, testing again, trying out things, failing, right? It goes on and on.
Exactly. Like if you're playing a game and you don't have to save and you don't have to restart, for at the start of the level or whatever, if you're not dying as the video game character, you're probably not playing on a hard enough difficulty.
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of playing the game is, if you could just coast through, as we were saying, then there's not really much challenge and there's not much, you don't get as much value out of it.
Yeah, your ego might get a nice little boost. Your confidence might feel elevated in that moment, but then afterwards you're like, Did
I really get anything?
Yeah, exactly. We played Age of Empires together. That's a strategy game.
That is a real-time strategy game. That's a terrific one.
That's really fun.
It's a classic.
I want to start getting a little bit into it.
And there's a little bit of history in there too.
There is.
Right? There you're learning about the different cultures, societies.
Yeah. The strategies, the techniques, their technology.
Yep.
The age, that time, like what was going on in the world.
Yeah, the sort of technology trees, right? How do you progress through the different sort of levels, the different stages of the development of the technology?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up here, maybe, as a gamer yourself, if you are a gamer listening and watching this, you might say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I do that. I've learned that. This is a way of, doing XYZ. Great. You might be nodding in agreement. And if you're not a gamer, maybe, consider starting to explore that type of activity. It's a great way to unwind, but also be really active, right? Your brain is getting a lot of stimulation in a good way, and you're learning so much. And so many of these lessons and skills can be applied to the real world, which is awesome.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the ability to actually interact with other people in these games, particularly in a non-native language.
Yeah.
Right? So just using the language in a way that really matters, because your communication with them can dictate whether or not you guys succeed at whatever sort of mission that you're on.
Absolutely.
That's huge. And that can be in written, that can be in voice. So there really are so many layers to this that are powerful.
So it might be something worth exploring, and I would love to hear your thoughts. What kind of skills do you think you learn? What have you learned if you're a gamer? What would you like to try to do? What's your, strategy for gaming? And share whatever you'd like in the Q&A and in the comments. So we look forward to hearing that. And thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We value you as a member of our community. And we're really looking forward to sharing the next steps of what's coming up, because we have some exciting news, and we look forward to sharing that with you very soon. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you're a follower. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and you're listening to it and sharing it with friends. And don't forget to leave us a nice review. And we love sharing this content with you. So definitely, stay here, and we will see you very, very soon. All right, bye for now.